Good afternoon and welcome to Attention Span Labs. I'm your host, Michael A. DiBaggio. Today is November, right? Yeah. November 15th, Wednesday. This is the beginning of the Nativity Fast for Orthodox or anyone else who fasts during this period. So I want to wish everyone a blessed fast. Remember that this is a reminder purely to myself, by the way, not so much saying anything about you, that fasting begins with the heart and the mouth, something I have much more trouble keeping than the food part of it, although I also have trouble keeping the food part of it. So pray for me that I can have some strength and resolve, and also just remembering. But so yes, today I'm going to do another one of these videos where I talk about something while I paint. Surprisingly, people seem to enjoy them. We'll be painting these 15mm Napoleonics. We talk about ImagiNations. What else? I guess I'll show you completed miniatures today. I do want to start by saying that the Saint of the Day that I just read to my son from his My Synaxarion book for November is St. Paisios Velikovsky, who reintroduced monasticism to Russia and Romania. A very interesting story. Those books are really cool, by the way. They're from Potomides Press. Potomides. I'll put a link in the comments. And they were recommended to me by audience member H. Elias 8, who said I should check those out for my son, especially this book on my warrior saints, which I got for him, and I also picked up the Synaxarion. Synaxarion is basically a book of the saint, one saint for each day. There are, of course, in both Eastern and Western calendars, usually many saints celebrate it, commemorate it on each day. But this picks out one of them and tells you about his life, and it's nicely illustrated. Very nice looking book for very high quality stuff. You can get coloring book. You can get warrior saint coloring books and stuff from them as well. But so yeah, check them out. All right, what do we got first before we get into these Napoleonics? I did finish these monster critters. Sort of teased them yesterday. Here are the spiders. The spiders are from giant spiders are from Wargames Atlantic. This is one painting style. I went back and forth on it for a while, but they're ready to go for fantasy or sci-fi, whatever. But using them in Frostgrave, Dragon Rampant, Xenos Rampant, stuff like that. And then also did these Wild Wolves, which are by our Arch Enemy Games Workshop, but I bought them I think I actually bought them before my son was born, so they're more than 6 years old. I did finally finish painting them and had a lot of fun painting them. They actually have a very nice texture. Oftentimes Games Workshop does make very good miniatures. They're overpriced, and oftentimes now over stylized, many details, but these are nice. They're gonna go. I was originally intending for them to be Goblin Wolf Riders, but the goblins I had from Nightmare Miniatures didn't quite fit on them, so I showed you the other ones. Sorry for the shaky camera. I'll try to, hopefully it's not too bad. And the final product. These were fun painting. They have nice textures on them. I did the contrasts, ink wash, or oil wash, and then highlights. Intended to play a game of Dragon Rampant the other day, but then my eldest got sick and decided to throw up on the steps. He's better now, but not sure what's wrong. They've both been getting cool colds and stomach bugs quite a bit. But all right. Anyway, so we didn't get to play that game, but that would have been our first game of Dragon Rampant. But maybe I'll film the next one. On with the show. These are 15 millimeter MiniFigs Napoleonics. These are Prussian Landwehr. I have mounted 10 of them on a 6-inch stick. This is on that Bladegrip thing that I mentioned from housecarl.com. You can check them out there. I think I paid 20 bucks for it. This is a 3D printed piece. It's meant to hold these. So one thing I'll talk about, a couple technical details. I didn't have to. So these are MiniFigs, not to be confused with Lego MiniFigs, but the company MiniFigs, which I think was around like the 70s. So they're pretty old. I don't know if these are from 70s, 80s, or whatever, but they're part of that batch I got for $140, where I got 44 pounds of miniatures. I mounted these to a 6-inch jumbo popsicle stick by means of hot glue. You probably use super glue. There would be less cleanup with the strings if you did that. I base coated them with a spray paint gray, and then zenithal highlighted them with white, so they are darker on the bottom and lighter on the top. And then one technical thing to mention is that when I put this on here, it actually did not fit full. It didn't fit on its own. Maybe it's not thick enough or whatever. But it's okay. I mounted it with a dab of hot glue at each end, and that does just pop off. You can slide a knife under there and it'll come off. Hot glue is easy to pull off, so it's not generally good for a permanent fixative at areas where you can actually get at it. But for this quick attachment, it's easy to get off. So I have on this sprue mostly riflemen with bayonets. They have the soft caps, kind of look like the combination covers. I know they're not really combination covers. Also got a drummer and I guess an officer with a saber there. And we will not be painting these. I should say I will not be painting them as the Prussian Landwehr. Will be doing them as an ImagiNations style. ImagiNations are fictitious countries made up, for your own fantasy, even when historical wargaming turns fantasy. So I had this idea for a while of doing a setting that was kind of a fantasy Napoleonic, low fantasy, somewhat horror oriented, something like the 1797 Dark Shadow sequence, or the whatever Middle European Germanic remnant country that all the Hammer horror Frankenstein movies take place in. If you've ever seen them, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That kind of feel and vibe to it. Early, late 18th century through mid 19th century, usually more like very early 19th century. And that's the vibe I'm going for, both for an RPG and a wargaming setting. And I'll do this in multiple scales, but these obviously are 15, so this will be for larger wargaming. So I'll come right back in a second to tell you about the nation they represent. Now these are the territorial defense troops, a militia of sorts that is equipped, at least partially, by the government of the Duchy of Bunveria. Bunveria, of course, being a combination of Bunny and Latveria. And it's going to be some kind of an obscure, well, it's a personal joke between my wife and I. But I just whipped this up today. I needed something for them to be from, and so I made up this country of Bunveria and placed it in this fantasy historical Europe that I had already whipped up for a D&D quasi World War I scenario, but this will be about 100 years before that. So the Duchy of Bunveria is one of the many remnants of the old empire, located in the ultramontane plain, running mostly northwest to southeast, bordered in the south and east by the Staden Mountains, which are also known as the Roof of the World, which is where that World War I scenario was taking place. And the Empire of Tiralia, to the west by the Recongere and the Vrie cantons, and in the north by Lantenango. Blessed with fertile mountain valleys and a wide east-west plain of meadows and pasture land. Bunveria's chief work is agricultural, and its population is almost entirely rustic, although a series of important mines along the mountains supply the riverside mills in its more urbanized east with coal and ore. It is a human-dominated polity, though parts of the bleaker walled forest in the east are still said to be haunted by fae and other abhumans, especially in the many ruined castles and watchtowers along the border. Historically, the southeastern part of Bunveria was part of the Lagomark, a rugged borderland that was violently contested for many centuries. And the current Duke descends from the Margraves of the Lagomark, the Lagomark, of course, being named after a breed of unusually large and ferocious predatory rabbit. The Duke is nominally the sovereign of Bunveria, though in reality he is bound by tradition and increasingly a lack of wealth and aptitude to rely on a council of land magnates, merchants, and clerical landholders to execute his designs. The more rapacious and grasping of this parvenu nobility would like to turn Bunveria into a scientific directorship, like so many of the lesser principalities recently conquered by les Mesureurs. But they understand that the highly traditional and clannish population will need to be guided into it, probably in the form of military conquest by the new empire. Already attempts by the textile guilds to impose the new Frangolian system of weights and measures were met by the burning of toll houses and the hangings of several wool brokers by angry mobs. So these will be from the countryside where they develop these angry mobs. Now, the Frangolian or Frangorian Empire, depending how you want to pronounce it, is of course based on the French with a very explicit occultist Illuminati twist. Giving, perhaps being unfair to Napoleon, their Napoleon figure is known as the Measurer, and his goal is to impose a rational dictatorship, a liberating rational dictatorship on the whole of the continent, starting with the enforcement of the Frangolian system of weights and measures, which of course is the metric system, which is of course demonic in nature. All right. With that out of the way, let's get on with the painting. So the colors I'll be primarily using for their uniforms are Vallejo model color Field Blue, the Nostalgia 88 range from War Colors Fire Orange 56. That wasn't blurry. And also be using for the trim Striking Scorpion Green, also from the Nostalgia 88. Just wanted to use some different paints. Let's get started. Actually, let's use the foam. Alright. Put my brush here. I've never used this before. We'll see how this works out. Definitely got to be better than trying to pinch, especially if you have carpal tunnel. So now I'm going to paint them this field blue, paint their pants. Anyway. Doing very smooth. Well, it's definitely, yeah, like I said, definitely an improvement over trying to pinch brush. And the nice thing about this style of painting is you're painting a lot of the same types of figures. And so you just paint them in a row, factory style. And since they're smaller figures, they all fit. Ooh, that one's about to fly off. They all fit on the stick. I won't be painting their boots. If I go over it, it doesn't matter. They're gonna be, boots are gonna be black. Ooh, a little too watery there. Picking that paint up a bit. I wonder if the primer didn't get too good on this guy. That may be the case on this, at this angle. So, I don't like the metric system. As you may have guessed from that introduction about Le Mesureur. I do think it's, if it's not, I mean, it's sort of demonic in its origins. It really is in real life. You know, you had all these secularists trying to basically, you know, the French revolutionaries, and actually a lot of Enlightenment types, including a lot of them in America, frankly. Though the ones in America were obviously much less bad than in other countries. But they had a lot of these utopian ideas about rationalism and how they were going to, you know, overthrow the old systems, and which, you know, had their bad points for sure, but you know, they were definitely going to impose them. And the metric system was one of these bad ideas. And everywhere the metric system has come out, it has been imposed by force. It's never like spontaneously adopted by the people. The people aren't like, oh man, let's give up our traditional system of weights and measures, which evolved organically, and for the most part, certainly the American, what's now should be called the American system, the imperial system, sort of evolved organically and was made for the daily needs of individuals. And a lot of people, even a lot of my classmates in America were like, oh, the metric system's so much better, why don't we use it? And they say this based on like how, you know, it's easy to convert. And the metric system is easier for conversion between units, since it's all, like, you always know it's like some kind of factor of 10. Almost always. You know, so they get this idea. Their exposure to the metric system comes in like high school physics or physics class, basically. And, you know, in that sense, it's true, because, like, what's easy to remember, that there's 1,000 meters in a kilometer, or 5,280 feet in a mile, or, you know, you get the idea. But actually, in reality, the metric system, that seemingly, that need for conversion is something that only a small class of people do, right? That's just scientists and some engineers, right? But in like the things that really matter, like to day-to-day lives of people, you know, like in cooking, nobody uses the metric system. Like even today in metric countries, when cooks give their recipes, they usually don't do it in metric, right? Because think about this: when you're working on a recipe and you want to increase or decrease the serving size, what do you more likely need to do? Do you more likely need to double it or halve it, or do you need to multiply it by a factor of 10 or divide it by a factor of 10? You almost never have to do it in 10. So the whole metric system benefit goes out the window in something like cooking. And even in things like, you know, like land measures. You know, and the canard straw man argument of this is like, well, what about furlongs and ells and league? Well, league's just 3 miles, but like, what about all this other stuff and this weird stuff that we don't use anymore? Well, we don't use it anymore. It used to be more important, but like the idea that like you know, a foot is a more useful system of measurement to human beings, right? Because it's, you know, you can see it's about the size of a large human foot, right? You can sort of gauge that versus the metric system where you're like, oh, a person is 1.5 meters tall. No one ever, or 1.6 or 1.78. Like, once you start getting into anything other than halves and quarters, maybe, people stop being able to think about it. So when you say things like someone is 1.65 meters tall or 1.7 meters tall, like, what the hell does that mean? I mean, you can calculate it, right? But on the other hand, if you say this person is 5 foot 9 inches tall, right? You know that they're, you know, that's about the average height of males in America. So, you know, you visualize and you know what 5 feet is. You know, 9 inches is about 3/4 of the way. You know, so even and you know, it's you can estimate it in your head. It's like, well, it's a little over 5.5 feet tall. I know what 5.5 feet look like. when you start getting into these weird fractions, it's actually not as intuitive and not as good for everyday use. That's why they actually have like rebellions and riots, and they come in and they have to arrest people, arrest bakers and stuff in Britain when they didn't want to use they wanted to use the standard pounds and ounces and stuff like that. You know, a kilogram is ridiculous for measuring fruit or vegetables when you're selling them, right? The gram is not even a measure of weight; it's a measure of mass, which, yes, equates to weight in the particular in the gravity field. But you can say something, well, this mass is this and that mass is universal. Well, who cares? Because you're only on Earth. But like, if you were in Mars and you were talking about mass, like, you're much more worried about weight, because like all of a sudden the same thing that you couldn't pick up on Earth, you can pick up on Mars. I'm not saying that the weight on Mars is a reason why the metric system sucks on Earth, right? But you understand what I'm saying. Like, it's not, the point is that the metric system is often made out to be this great thing to say it's non-arbitrary, that it's easier to do, but in fact it is arbitrary, right? Every human system of measurement is arbitrary. They decide it on an arbitrary block of metal to represent what a gram is, to decide on the length of an arbitrary piece of metal to determine what a meter is. So it's not like it was ordained by God. It's not like, there's nothing inherently in the structure of the universe that says this is why we should use, meters or whatever instead of pounds and ounces. It just isn't. So it is arbitrary, and it is, as I just said, in many cases, it's actually harder to for daily usage. People don't like to use it. That's why it's always imposed by force. And like, look at temperature. We can say, well, it's much more logical to have, I know Celsius. Well, actually, okay, Celsius is not actually metric. Kelvin's metric, but that's even worse than Celsius. But you can say it's much more logical to have the boiling or the freezing point of water be 0 degrees, and the boiling point of water be 100, right? But that's a much, if you think about that in versus the Fahrenheit system, where the freezing point is 32 degrees, and you can say, well, that's pretty weird, isn't it? Well, and the boiling point is 212 degrees. Yeah, that is pretty weird with those like weird numbers. They're not round numbers. So in that, you say, oh, well, Celsius has the benefit. But in terms of when you're trying to figure out the actual temperature, like your use in daily life, when you're not talking about scientific measurements that have this very high levels of instrumented precision and things like that, there's a lot more granularity in the Fahrenheit system. And no, that's not purely metric, I get that, but it's even worse when you're talking about kelvins. Like, nobody uses kelvins for temperature in their daily life. They just don't. You have a much, but those that a lot of them do use Celsius, but there's actually much more better temperature granularity, in Fahrenheit, because it's a wider range, right? So you're never going to be at or near, thank God. Well, unless there's some sort of atomic explosion or something, you're never going to be near at 100 Celsius. but you're always going to be restricted to the lower end of it, and then you start getting into these, fractions of a degree and so forth. So I think I've settled the case there. I guess what I'll talk about now is imaginations and why I like them. Imaginations, as I said, are that's ImagiNations. There's two separate things. So you take like a historical setting or a quasi historical setting, instead of using the real belligerents, you do your own thing. And did I mean to do that? I think I might have painted the pants the wrong color. Well, poop. No, I did. I meant to paint them. Yeah, I'm going to paint them green. This is the wrong color. I'm going to put it down. So I'm going to put some of the scorpion green down. But what I like about it, just like I like doing weird war for alternate history, it's freeing. You don't feel tied down by color schemes you don't like, by army formations you don't like. You make up your own, and no one can say you're wrong. I like that creative aspect of it. I don't really care about people saying I'm wrong. I don't ask for their opinions on the the layout of my armies or something, except for in terms of would this be effective or is this plausible. But the kind of people are like, you painted that camouflage scheme doesn't exist, or they didn't use that uniform in that year. But I don't care about any of that. Said that before, said that many times before, and that hasn't changed. So the imaginations get you away from that. You can use, say you don't like. I don't like the Prussians. I don't ever want to play the Prussians, but maybe I like their uniforms. I like a particular kind of uniform, a particular kind of unit they had or something. But I want to paint them in a different style and give them a different fictional history. Maybe I want to set up fights. Maybe I have Prussians and my friend has. Let's use a better example. Say, I have Russians and my friend has British, and there's no actual situation in the Napoleonic Wars where the Russians and the British fought each other. But you need to fight someone, right? So instead you make up this fictional history, you make up this fictional stories of these countries, and suddenly anybody can fight anybody. It's freeing both in a creative tabletop crafting sense and freeing also in a gameplay sense. So one thing I forgot about this scorpion green, it's a very bright, vivid green. It's very eye-pleasing. It pops a lot. Very good for Napoleonic type figures. But it's very thin and translucent. It's not a bad thing necessarily. But if you're doing it over anything other than white, you're going to need a lot more coats. And it is... it's almost like a contrast paint. It's not quite at that level, but it has that sort of translucency to it. It doesn't flow as much as a contrast paint or a speed paint, as you prefer, whatever you like to call it. So I did field blue for their pants. I'm going to do the striking scorpion green for their tunics, and I'm going to have red caps. Boots will be black. Yeah, rifles will be brown and so forth. I won't paint their faces till the end. That's kind of... I'll give them a wash. They do have piping, and they do have braids and stuff, and I have not yet decided what colors they should be, or even how I'm going to paint them at the 15mm scale. You need a very, very fine brush, and really a little goes a long way. It's not possible. I do see people do it. I usually don't. I'm also going to make their collars pop out a bit, but we want to just establish the flats here, get the base coats down. So I'm you know, trying to figure out different ways to hold this. It's not uncomfortable. It doesn't strike me as being like, wow, you know, this is revolutionary or anything, but it is nice to have one thing that will hold 10 soldiers at this scale and not have to continually change them out. Because one thing that sucks about those these Citadel ones, which is like one of the only reasonable tools that GW actually makes, all their other stuff is way overpriced garbage, is that you have to switch them out after every figure. You know, they don't hold more than one figure. This is a nice way of doing this style. We'll see when I have to do actually, I'm going to do it now with detail painting. I'm going to show you. I'm going to push this up against my chest, get better control over it. Oh, that's very nice. Yes, very nice. The length of it allows you to push it against your chest, but still get a lot of range out, so you're just not right up against. You don't have to tilt your head that far down. It's a bit hard. These minis are fun. They have nice detail on them. Not gonna say they don't, but because it's older pewter. Some of the detail is hard to make out exactly what it's supposed to be, where the straps end and where the piping, like the uniform parts, begin. That's okay. The wash will bring a lot of that together, so you won't even notice it. Well, this striking scorpion green is going on better than I expected it to. But yeah, also like at this scale, at the 15mm scale, the details are just harder and harder to see. As far as infantry goes, 15 is about the lowest I will go. I did buy those 10mm He-Man minis, the Power Barbarians. They're going to necessarily be a crude paint job, but I do have, actually in my collection, I have 12mm infantry for the Heavy Gear game. Heavy Gear Blitz. Heavy Gear is actually a 12mm game, 1/144th scale. Fine for vehicles. Even 6mm is okay for vehicles, but paint infantry. Anybody who's ever painted the old Epic 8mm knows what I'm talking about. Infantry just looks unsatisfying. And there's a pain to paint. Can't even tell what you're looking at half the time. On the other hand, you can get so far down the scale, like at 3 or 2mm, that there basically isn't any detail, so you can't go wrong. You just smear them. 15 is just large enough to see a good amount of detail, but not punishing you for if you decide you can't paint it all. I'm leaving most of their straps. Yeah, I can't tell where. Oh, that's their belt, I guess. Okay, so I go about knowing what I know about Napoleonic uniforms, that style. The waist is going to be somewhat high up, like farmer pants, and then going to be belt in the. So I probably need to go back and redo the trousers, put them up a bit. But yeah, this is pretty nice, and there's different ways you can grip it. If I wanted to give more stability to the far end, it's easy to do that. You can also grab them, but here I'm not sure what's the best. You're going to want to experiment it if you want to buy one of your own. I do recommend something like this. I mean, you could probably make one of your own too, but it does have a lot of nice grips built into it. And if you're like me and you have some problems with carpal tunnel, every so often I have to go to a chiropractor and basically get him to abuse my arm and my shoulder. Actually, most of the work is on my shoulders with this metal tool that he digs in and like breaks up all the scar tissue, and then I'm good for a while. But it's hard to get around that when you work at a computer all the time. And actually, the miniatures make it harder on me than working on a keyboard. Hello, Pip. My dog Pip just came in. Say hello to Pip, everyone. Oh, there's some, detail back here. Behind their packs, don't forget. The main thing you want to do is you want to make sure you get a good coat, base coat to cover up all the primer or bare metal if you've left any, because that's what'll really look bad at this level, because that'll jump out, stare you in the face. And this guy's arm is actually disconnected. Yeah, so did any of you do ImagiNations? And ImagiNations is not just a Napoleonic Wars thing. It's any era. It's sci-fi. It's fantasy. You know, in sci-fi and fantasy, obviously you are definitely making up. You know, obviously the belligerents don't really exist. However, there's nothing wrong with doing, contrary to what the Coomers will tell you, there's nothing wrong with making up your own nations in something like Warhammer or established settings like BattleTech. You know, do your own thing. Don't be cheesy about it. Don't make your Mary Sue faction. But experiment with it. Have fun. Change history. You can have alternate fictional histories too. So why don't you guys tell me about, in the comments, what imaginations you've done or would like to do. What settings you'd like to do it in terms of time periods, in terms of genres. Also, if you do Napoleonics, what are some of your favorite manufacturers? When did you get into it? What's your preferred scale or your preferred rule set? As I said in the other video, I bought Shaco 2 to try out. So these will be based, Shaco 2 is very, I was just reading about it today. It doesn't require you to rebase anything, but it just requires that all your units have a similar frontage. So the way I'm going to mainly do it, they're sort of the default way they show in the illustrations, but as I said, not required, is as for like line infantry to have four infantry on a base. And I had here, put this down for a second. I use one of these MDF bases that will nicely accommodate 4 infantry in line order or 3 in skirmish order. And then cavalry are 2 on a base. Oops, I hit the wrong color there. I think I'm coming to the end of this video because I'm running out of battery power. Luckily, I've said the interesting things, I think. So, if you like this video, please subscribe, give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, share it on your blogs, and, Reddit, and other communist places like that, where people are sure to get in a conniption about me trashing the metric system and their utopian social ideas. But please leave a comment if you like it. Tell me if you want to see more of this kind of stuff, or what you'd like to see, any questions you have. I especially want to hear about your experience with your Napoleonic armies, what kind of scales you play in, and particularly what imaginations, ideas you've come up with. But for now, that's it for me. Attention Span Labs signing off. God bless you. Have a good day.